To welcome you to this evening's screening of Maggie's Plan. We want to thank our co-presenters for this screening, SF Sketchfest, and we also want to thank our premier sponsors, Hotel Joie de Vivre, who've helped us bring so many guests here and put them up while they're here. You know, all of us who put on the festival are planners, so we can maybe particularly relate to a character who has to make do when the best laid plans don't always go exactly her way. It's always such a pleasure to be able to screen a comedy. When I was in film school, whenever we would try and do anything funny, our film school teacher would say, comedy is hard. And this film makes it look easy. We're so pleased that we have the director of Maggie's Plan with us here. So please welcome director Rebecca Miller.
What a great city, what an amazing day, and what a wonderful festival. And thank you to the festival for inviting us here. So this film is, in a way, I think, 5 love stories, I always think, which I'll allow you to discover as you watch the film what they are. It was definitely a film that was built for pleasure in a way that I haven't quite done before. It's a different kind of film in some ways for me, but it was a wonderful experience, and I got to work with such great actors. And they're not here right now, but I just want to say thank you to Julianne Moore and Greta Gerwig and Ethan Hawke and Bill Hader and Maya Rudolph and Travis Fimmel, who were my collaborators and created this film with me, and my producers, Rachel Horovitz and Damon Cardesis, who are here and will be here after the film if you want to talk to us about anything. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you later.
Rachel Horovitz and Damon Cardesis, producers. Or two to get us started, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I usually just like to start with the origin story. So I'm wondering what was the original idea, thought, thing that you wanted to do when you started thinking about making this film?
Well, Karen Rinaldi had written a novel that was at that time unpublished, and she's a good friend of mine, and she sent me the chapters that were the Maggie chapters that had the triangle of Maggie, Johnny, Georgette, and the fundamental hook of the idea of what happens when you realize your husband is perfectly his ex-wife. And I thought that was great, and I showed it to Damon, and then I showed it to Rachel, and we all agreed that it was great, and then I built it out and the screenplay out of it with many conversations with everybody.
And I mean, I alluded to the comedy thing at the beginning because, you know, your films are wonderful, but many of them are quite sad and not comedic. So I'm wondering, was wanting to make a comedy part of what interested you, or was it just that comedy was in the book that you liked?
Well, I mean, it was a funny premise, but basically, it wasn't actually that funny. The thing that I was sent, it was the idea I thought was funny. All my movies have some comedy in them, and I just wanted to flip the ratio, you know, so that it was more funny than sad, maybe. And then I had just written a book called Jacob's Folly, which was really kind of a comic novel, and so I was sort of in that mode. I was excited by the idea of something that was more on the light side.
So maybe you guys can talk a little bit about what you do as producers to support the vision of the director when she comes to you and says hey, I read this thing, it's really great. What do you think?
Well, I mean, you just work hard to execute her vision and sort of build it out, and it's almost like being the CEO of a company. I mean, you're sort of moving all the aspects along, you're sort of dealing with all of the problems, whether it's creatively or just sort of physically or logistically, you're sort of constantly moving this sort of rock uphill and making sure that she can execute her vision the best way she sees fit.
Very well said.
Thank you.
I'm going to use that from now on. I guess I would just add that I really love working with writers. In particular, I love script development, and I sometimes do it and don't make the movie. And what was so beautiful about working with a writer-director is that she was going to make the movie. We were not going to just keep developing. And that was a really special experience because it was 2-for-1, and it was a movie in her head, even though she was completely agile and collaborative and so open to, also working with the actors once they got involved in their characters.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, just talking about script development, because you have such lovely characters and such fantastic actors playing them, and I'm wondering at what point you start thinking about actors as part of the characters and whether that influences the way they develop it all.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, the last draft of a film is really once it's cast, and I can sort of sew the characters onto the actors, and then mold it, and so that there isn't a gap between the actor and the character anymore. And but that's not just because I'm sewing to them who they are already. It's that we meet in the middle. That the character that they're developing and the character that I've written can kind of like inch towards each other until finally there's no room between us. And that just was really just many, many conversations over a long period of time. In the case of Brett and Julianne, I think it was a year because it took us a little extra time to get the money for the movie together, so which was always good news because you have more time. And so it was just time talking and thinking, and in the case of Greta Gerwig, just really deeply thinking about her character, things like the fact that she's Quaker, things that, like her modesty, all sorts of very personal things got talked about. And the same with Julianne. And then ultimately Ethan was also very important because he said, for example, I really think that originally the ending was actually a marriage, like after the remarriage of Georgette and John. And he said, this is a whole conversation about whether or not we should be that resolved. And in the end, I really thought, no, we should not be completely resolved. We should even lift off, like just as everybody's about to, lift off. And I felt that was more true and more real. And so, but that came out of conversation with him. So it's a great moment to be able to turn the final turn of the screw once you pass.
Do you guys have questions out there? Yeah, we'll start with you in front.
What was the first clue that the little girl was the pickle guy's daughter? I know what I picked up. I just want to know what you.
The question, if you couldn't hear it up there, is what was the first clue that the little girl was the pickle guy's daughter?
I think her love of numbers was what I was trying to sort of think, is that she had a love of numbers.
So the scene in the pool, in the bathtub,
yeah,
was it.
Yeah.
Because when he looked at her also, there was something there.
Definitely, yes. Well, that's also his expectation because he also, I think he does suspect it. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because some people are 100% sure all the time that that's the case, and some people forget about it and they're surprised. I'm happy with either one. In fact, I mean, I don't know necessarily that he definitely is, but I think
Anyone up there? All quiet on the balcony. Yep.
The film seemed to reference mythology a lot, hubris and fate, and all these sort of lots of things to do with mythology. And I just wanted to know if that was part of your vision for the film, or how much that was in the novel, or how much you wanted to say about that.
so the question is how much mythology is sort of in the film. I mean, I think definitely the idea of hubris, of pride, that you can almost play God was part of the film. I looked a lot at Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare's play, in terms of its symmetry and its sort of sense that there's like a little, something else going on when the mortals think that they're running the show, and they're really not. So there was a bit of that, the sort of sense of a larger reality that people aren't aware of. And I did want it to have a kind of fairy tale or mythic quality to it.
Yes?
I'm not familiar with the book, but was Julianne Moore's character more created out of your sense? Was it taken from the book itself? She was this Nordic woman with all this, or did you make it your own twist back in?
Yeah, so the question was about Julianne Moore's character and what was she like in the original chapters and how she developed.
Well, the book, which is called The End of Men and is going to be published, I think, in a year. I have never read the whole book, but the parts of it that were the chapters that I read, Julianne's character was actually originally French. She had written a book about geishas, but the specifics weren't mentioned. She had had a big success with a book that was basically about her breakup. Those were the main things, and her slightly dominating presence. And then we made her Danish, because I thought she should be Northern European rather than French. I thought it was like more original, but also because I think Northern European women have maybe a more sort of they can tolerate infidelity a little bit better. I like the idea of a kind of a woman who comes to this theory that really we should really be more tolerant of infidelity, even though she actually doesn't feel that way. The idea of a sort of Nordic goddess. So I guess it was a real mating of what she had come up with and what I thought about, and then really what Julianne came up with together with me.
You know, you shot in New York, and it's one of those New York movies where, like, they're recognizable New York places. You can see it on the street. I'm wondering how important that setting was to the story, and, you know, how important it was for you to shoot on the streets in New York.
Well, I mean, I'll let you guys say your point of view. From my point of view, it was very important because I had lived in Ireland for some years, like 6 years, and moved back just a little bit before we started the film. And so I was sort of back in love with New York, and in a way, one of the love stories of this movie is definitely my love story with New York, and seeing it again, and seeing it in a beautiful way. Every city you can look at as ugly or beautiful, and definitely I chose to make it beautiful this time.
Yeah, and I think showing sides of New York that aren't always captured, and I mean, there's no sort of Empire State Building shot. I mean, some of it, Washington Square, yes, but parts of Brooklyn and Queens and sort of places that aren't so familiar, and I don't know, there's just an energy about New York that I think plays really well in the film. And the whole snow scene, when it was Quebec, that was only 45 minutes north of New York City. There happened to be a snowstorm the day when we were actually shooting it, which worked out perfectly because we hadn't budgeted for snow.
Talk about mythology and destiny.
Yeah.
As producers, when you hear that someone wants to shoot on the streets of New York, does that excite you, or do you just go like, oh?
It was at one point, I mean, it was more than exciting. We were at one point thinking we were neighbors, and we would just try to keep it within the zip code.
Like all
The cast is all New York too.
But I've been producing movies for 25 plus years, and it's the first one I've ever made in the city. And I don't know what that says exactly, but also it's a lower budget movie. And what's so remarkable is that because everything has changed, it was easier than we thought. And just a note to any filmmakers who are thinking of shooting in New York: if you have stars, you get a lot of free publicity. And I hadn't anticipated that, but it was actually awesome because we're used to, our publicist is here, you'll know this and relate to it. You often try to place a photograph in like People magazine or somewhere to get an early look in Entertainment Weekly, and we didn't have to do any of that. It was done for us.
Paparazzi was everywhere.
Yeah, it was problematic as well. But.
we probably have time for the last few. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say lower budget, what do you mean?
When you say lower budget, what do you mean?
Under 100 million.
Yeah, Men in Black 5 or whatever. And those are the movies you see if you walk around the streets probably here or in any city in America. You see big trucks. It's definitely, 50 million or above.
And it's interesting because so much is shooting in New York now between television shows and movies that there's a competition over crew, and obviously, everyone's sort of fighting over the best, and when you have a smaller budget, it's harder to get great people because they want to go on the higher budget stuff because they're getting paid more. So it was a really interesting situation of finding like the best crew that could work at that budget, and it worked out really well. That it was a freezing winter, like we had this polar vortex thing that happened, I guess, and the crew really bonded, and it ended up that like we were making our days, and the grips were giving some of their money to other departments, and I don't know, it worked out really amazing.
Okay. Oh gosh, now as soon as the last question, 16 people, hands up. Yeah, go ahead over there.
Yes, there is pictocritical anthropology. It's actually an important, I don't know what you'd call it, strand of academia. There's a man named Michael Taussig, who teaches at Columbia, that John was sort of loosely based on. I mean, not really based on, because I don't know Michael Taussig, but the idea of Michael Taussig.
Well, thank you so much for coming.